Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. At last, Ukrainian troops in the Kharkiv Oblast are getting enough artillery shells to halt the Russians. Military aid from the United States was passed almost a month ago, and it's taken almost a month for all these shells to trickle down the logistics supply chain in sufficient quantities. But it's happening. Things today are better than they were a month ago, and a month from now they're going to be even better once the Czechs' initiative artillery shells start arriving. And for the last couple months, Russia's been experimenting with these bizarre turtle tanks. Basically, they weld so much on top of the tank that the turret can't move and all the sensors are useless. The tank can't see anything. But given that Ukraine was lacking artillery shells, they were heavily reliant on FPV drones to stop these tanks. Well, turtle tanks don't do anything to stop artillery shells. They might have been mildly effective against drones, but I think now that artillery shells are showing up in sufficient quantities, Russia's turtle tank idea is probably going to go away. But all across the front, in every direction, Russia's made no significant advance in the last 7 days. Every time they try to advance in Donetsk or in Luhansk or in Kharkiv, they're getting smashed by artillery now. But Russia can still do a lot of damage. This is what the Russian world looks like. This is the village of Vovchansk. Russia's just destroying every building and killing every person. Russian forces are just shooting civilians that they find remaining in Vovchansk. I can't share this video. I'll link it down below. It does show bodies, but Ukrainian drones can find the bodies of civilians laying in the streets on the north side of the city that the Russians control. So when a Russian soldier finds a Ukrainian civilian remaining in the town, they're just executed on sight. I have to share these videos, I have to share these stories, they're heartbreaking. A lot of the people who refuse to leave their villages are elderly and they don't want to start over. They don't want to go somewhere else, being an internal refugee. Here's one story of a woman who was forced to flee her home in Vovchansk.
Не плачь, говори. Бомбят закроют. Ты сам додумайся. Осколки. Спасибо. Еле дошли.
Спасибо, ребята.
Детки. Чтобы не было на старости лет, и вот свою хату бросить и идти куда пристались. Это не снилось.
Это капец. Оце 2 дня, там капець, що твориться. Я і не ночевала дома. Не ночевала. Нельзя было ночевать, страшно очень.
70 год и нету жилья. 65 год нет.
Ages 65 and 70, these two women are now homeless, internal refugees, and they have nothing because of Russia. So here's the hot story everyone's talking about this week. U.S. Defense Secretary Austin reaffirms restrictions on Ukraine's use of American weapons in Russia. So the Defense Secretary was asked, do you support American weapons being used on the territory of Russia? And he's just going to say whatever President Biden tells him to say. This is the official position from the White House at this moment. But things are going to change. Pressure mounts on the United States over restrictions for Ukraine to hit Russia with U.S. weapons. And this is the political process. This is what's supposed to happen. It's happening now. U.S. lawmakers asked the Pentagon to allow Ukraine to use long-range weapons on Russian territory. So this is a letter drafted by Republican Congressman Mike Turner. He's the chairman of the House Intel Committee, asking for the White House to give permission to Ukraine to use U.S.-donated weapons on the territory of Russia, authorizing the use of U.S.-provided weapons to strike strategic targets within Russian territory under certain circumstances. Here's what Congressman Mike Turner has to say. Ukrainian officials have expressed grave concerns, stating that the situation is worse than ever. The United States should authorize Ukraine to use weapons capable of striking targets within Russia under certain circumstances, as well as train additional Ukrainian F-16 pilots and bolster Ukraine's air defense systems. So that was Mike Turner. And this is a clip that went viral of Republican Mike McCall. This is the clip from C-SPAN. He's currently talking to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken.
Ukraine. We have a really bad situation going on, as you know. This is a sanctuary zone that the Russians have created. And what they're doing is they're lining up all their artillery and rockets and missiles just across the Ukraine border that they then use to attack the Ukrainians. However, your administration and Jake Sullivan have restricted the arms use so that Ukraine cannot defend itself and fire back at Russia. That's why I mandated the ATACMS and the supplemental, the long range, short range, and the HIMARS, that your administration is tying their hands behind their back, not unlike what you're trying to do in Israel. Will you change this policy so Ukraine can fight without one hand tied behind its back?
This is important. In the aid bill that Congress passed last month, they insisted that the White House send ATACMS. This is federal law drafted in the bill to force President Biden to do it. So I want to make that distinction that Congress didn't put any restrictions on the use of American weapons on Russian territory. Congress didn't say that. This is White House policy. So here is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's response.
Well, as you know, we've rallied 50 countries over the last 2 years to come to Ukraine's defense, to provide it with the weapons it needs to defend itself, to push back against Russian aggression. When it comes to enabling, endorsing attacks outside of Ukraine, that's not something we've done, but Ukraine will have to make and will make its own decisions, and I want to make sure it gets the equipment that it needs.
Well,
to
you know, Congress.
So Anthony Blinken said the exact same thing 3 days ago. Ukraine has to make their own decisions what they do with U.S. donated weapons. But that's not the official position of President Biden and the White House.
Got them the equipment, and thank you for implementing that. But Congress did not put restrictions on the use of these weapons. It's Jake Sullivan and your administration that has put the restrictions on these weapons. And I talked to them, and this is not, they cannot achieve victory with these restrictions that you, not the Congress, have placed on them. And I hope you'll take that back to the National Security Advisor and the National Security Council and change this policy decision that is very dangerous and damaging to the Ukrainian people.
So this is the political process in Washington, D.C. playing out. What the Russians have done by opening this new front in Kharkiv, also amassing soldiers on the border in Sumy, as well as Chernihiv, they're trying to exploit this loophole to create this asymmetrical warfare. They want to be able to fly their jets with their glide bombs over Russian territory without being shot down. At the moment, when they fly their jets over the occupied territories, maybe it's a Patriot launcher, more than likely it's man-pads and Stingers, their jets are getting shot down. But if they just fly over Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk, their aviation is safe, along with their artillery units, along with their troop concentrations, 100 or more soldiers gathered in one spot. So Russia doesn't realistically think they can take the city of Chernihiv or the city of Sumy or the city of Kharkiv. They just want to perpetuate this war of attrition on a battle space that greatly benefits them. So all this analysis is being done now, presentations are being made, people are being briefed, conversations are being had, and I do think the policy is going to change. And here's a huge boost. Speaker Johnson says Ukrainians should be allowed to fight the war as they see fit. Given that the House Intel chairman was talking about this, A reporter asked Speaker Johnson, and I want to give him credit, he gave a good answer.
Speaker, could I ask you a quick question? Your colleagues from House Intelligence Committee, they just released a statement in which they're calling for administration to allow Ukraine to use American weaponry on the military targets on Russian territory. Would you support that? Because right now they have weapons, but they have restrictions to use that.
I think we need to allow Ukraine to prosecute the war and the way they see fit. They need to be able to fight back, and I think us trying to micromanage the effort there is not good policy for us.
So there you have it. The second most powerful man in the U.S. government is asking the White House to lift these restrictions so Ukrainians can use U.S. weapons on Russian territory. I honestly don't know how much thought Mike Johnson put into that statement, but it is pretty profound. I still follow him on Twitter, and he talks about Israel every day. He talks about the southern border occasionally. But he's not mentioned Russia or Ukraine once since the defense aid package was passed last month. But here's the debate happening in the White House. After a sobering trip to Kyiv, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is urging the president to lift these restrictions. So here's President Biden in the middle. This is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. This is Secretary of State Antony Blinken. I'm pretty sure the Pentagon and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in favor of lifting the restrictions. But this is how President Biden thinks and operates. He views himself as a moderate, as a compromiser. So Biden is going to talk to and meet with each one of these team members on the National Security Council individually, and then come to a decision. So if it's a majority, including the Speaker of the House, telling Biden to lift these restrictions, he's probably going to overrule Jake Sullivan in the next week and lift the restrictions, or come up with some kind of bizarre compromise, because that's just how Biden thinks and operates. So what will be the new policy? I don't think it'll be publicly announced, but I do think the United States will talk to President Zelensky, and something is going to change. If you want my opinion, what do I think is going to happen in the next week? I think the White House is going to give permission for Ukraine to use U.S. weapons on these three oblasts: Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod. Any valid Russian military targets in these three oblasts will become fair game for U.S. weapons. In response, as retaliation for Russia trying to exploit this loophole and opening a new front in Kharkiv. So this was Russia's brilliant plan. The United States, I think, will call their bluff, and the situation is actually going to get worse for Russia as a consequence of them invading Kharkiv again. We'll find out more at the end of this month. In the meantime, let's get to the bad news for Russia. Yesterday, another ATACMS strike took place in Donetsk. Reportedly, 5 ATACMS were launched to destroy this air defense complex. 2 S-300 or 400 air defense missile launchers were destroyed. Another one was damaged. Also, a radar truck was destroyed, and a control center for the S-300 and 400. This just makes me laugh every time. Russia claims they can shoot down the ATACMS, but all their air defense systems keep getting destroyed by ATACMS. Ukrainian forces shoot down another Russian Su-25 aircraft. I'm pretty confident at this point Ukraine is just using man-pads and stingers. They've been given a new supply in the last month. And I guess these Russian planes are just flying in very predictable paths. These planes have to climb pretty high in elevation before they can fire off their glide bombs, these Fab 1500s. And Ukraine's waiting for them, and they're getting them at the rate of about 1 every other day. Scout missile strike reportedly wounds top Russian general, Colonel General Gennady Anishkin, who commands all Russian forces on the southern front, was reportedly wounded in a, a scalp missile strike. Russian Army general arrested on fraud charges. Another one of Shoigu's deputies bites the dust. This is Ivan Popov, ex-commander of the Russian 58th Army. He's accused of fraud of over 100 million rubles. So, I don't know, is that like 6,000 US dollars now or something? Ukraine confirms they did destroy the Russian Navy ship, the Cyclone. This was Russia's last surface-caliber missile ship in occupied Crimea. This strike occurred last week, but given that the ship sank, there's not really any evidence, unless the Russians managed to capture and release the video. But based on rescue ships in the area trying to salvage what they can, Ukraine can now confirm the ship is gone. And I don't think going forward we're going to get a lot of good pictures and videos. We sometimes do get them, but it's becoming less frequent. And it's because the Russian government is doing everything they can to stop their people from taking these pictures and videos and posting them online. This is how extreme it's getting in Russia. Russian woman who filmed troops sentenced to 12 years for treason. Here's the video. This 21-year-old living in Chita is being charged with treason. They arrested her in her home and filmed it on camera. And all she did was take some videos of troop movements and then posted it on her social media. But she lives 5,000 kilometers from Ukraine. And she was just taking video. But this is how crazy things are getting in Russia, that a man with a face mask dressed in all black will come to your home to arrest you for just posting a video online. Flooding is still bad across Russia. Flooding emergency declared in the Far East. This is Sakha. This is located kind of northeastern Russia, but yeah, Russia might want to worry about and take care of their own people at some points in the future. Mariupol partisans set Russian warehouse on fire, advisor confirms. Lots of weird, bizarre fires break out across Russia all the time. I don't always mention them, but let me hit you with a few from the last 2 days. A prison hospital caught fire. I'll link the video down below. Massive warehouse in Krasnodar caught fire. Link the video down below. And I want to share this one because I've never seen this before, but train cars. These look like passenger train cars caught on fire in a Moscow suburb. How can passenger train cars be that flammable? I don't understand. Okay, here's the other top story from the last 2 days. Russia's proposal to redraw the Baltic Sea borders sparks concern from neighbors. So on an official government website, they declared that they were going to change the maritime borders. This is the Gulf of Finland. This is Finland up here. This is Estonia down here. And Russia wants to extend their maritime borders over these small uninhabited islands. You can't really do that. You kind of have to either talk to your neighbors and get their consent if you're going to redraw the maps, but we live in the age of empires again, and this is just what Russia's going to do whenever they feel like it. Redraw the lines and take territory from their neighbors. Swedish commander, Putin aims to control the Baltic Sea, has his eye on Gotland Island. Now, if you live in Europe, you probably know what Gotland Island is, but for anyone else, this island might strategically be the most important island for NATO now. Now that Finland and Sweden are in the alliance, the Baltic Sea is basically a NATO lake, and Gotland Island is going to be turned into the largest NATO airbase probably in the next 10 years. The value is from this island, NATO planes can strike anything they want in Russia should a war break out. And an island is an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers can be vulnerable, but how do you sink an island? Russia's done the exact same thing with Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad is basically an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the heart of Europe, and NATO's response to Kaliningrad will be Gotland Island. When Putin's regime collapses, when Russia breaks up, Kaliningrad has to be demilitarized, and it's going to be given its independence, but progress one day at a time. So let's check in on Russian state TV again. I watch these clips to better understand what the Russians are thinking and what they want, but it's just complete nonsense every single day. Let me share this clip with you. So in this clip, they're talking about their historical rivalry with Sweden. And now they, the Swedes, teach in their schools that it was wonderful, how good it was that they lost Poltava and the second time in Narva, and lost the Northern War in general. This war was over 300 years ago, and Russia's still talking about it. Because it discouraged their ambitions to interfere not only in Russia, but also in international politics. And how I want to see the same thing happen, this time with Sweden of the early 18th century. Thanks, God bless him, to Belousov, who, God willing, will bring order to the finances in the army, to the new government, which, God willing, will bring order to the fairness of revenues, to our first of all president, who will never give up those goals, who will never give up the Russians who are in those regions. And of course, thanks first of all to our people who are united now, as they have not been for a very long time. Perhaps there has not been such unity since the Great Patriotic War. If you reject unity, you get sent to jail. We must use this moment to teach Sweden a lesson, so that 200 years from now they will still collectively say, "Thank you very much. We are not going anywhere else." Let them drink their Tuborg beer, fry their meatballs, which they were also taught to fry by the Turkish Sultan Karl. Of course, Karl. Let them drink Baltica beer, not Tuborg. Yes, and they'll sit quietly and peacefully and mind their own business. Wouldn't that be great? Of course, and beer will cost 2 rubles, 46 kopecks. I know I'm not Russian or Swedish, but I literally have no clue what these people are talking about. A year and a half ago, if you remember, Russia passed a law making it a criminal offense to talk about any specifics related to the war. If you talk about tactics or troop morale or troop training or weapon systems or anything, you go to jail in Russia. So on Kremlin State TV, they have to fill their airtime talking about something. And I guess they want to talk about how the Turkish Sultan Karl taught the Swedes how to fry meatballs. The Great Northern War was over 300 years ago. So Sweden plans to allocate $7 billion in military aid to Ukraine over the next 3 years. Thank you so much, the amazing Swedish people. Ukraine's Sea Baby maritime drone can now carry 122mm rockets to attack ground targets. And we're going there, guys. The evolution of warfare. Ukraine has now put rocket launchers on their sea drones to sink Russia's navy. 10 Ukrainian soldiers have completed their F-16 maintenance training in the Netherlands. It's not just about training the pilots. Equally as important, it's about training the maintainers to maintain these F-16s once Ukraine has them. And Ukraine's going to have them probably in the next 3 weeks. Final feel-good clip I have for you guys is a Ukrainian girl showing kindness to her defenders when you are still small but have a big heart. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.